I think it's come a long way, a remarkably long way. When I think back to when the Business Council for Sustainable Development started 20 years ago, and I wasn't directly involved, but my boss, Bob Field, was one of the founding members. He was the boss of Toyota at that stage. There was quite a lot of resistance. There were some passionate organisations that wanted to be kind of involved in this sustainability movement, and there was lots of stuff happening overseas. But there was a lot of disinterest as well. And through those early years, there was a lot of tension about, well, how far do you want to push on things? Because we all understand now that everybody's on a journey. But in those early days, there was a sense in which anybody who wasn't pure and clean would kind of be a bit paranoid about where are we going with this. And when we got into the business of lobbying governments and wrestling with issues like the emissions trading scheme, there was a lot of angst. And it was a difficult first decade. The second decade has been, it's kind of like we've moved on a trajectory from going slow up to really fast, and I think sustainability has moved dramatically into the mainstream. If you take just the example of our membership, which has gone from sort of in the 40s to well over 100 now, dramatic change. If you think about the standards of reporting, I mean, there were hardly any companies who reported on their sustainability footprint or kind of had any transparency about what they were doing wrong and what their countermeasures were to fix things and so on. Now it's almost like a minimum requirement from the stock exchange. Institutional investors want that kind of information. It's a huge shift. There's a lot of people playing in the space of trying to make people think more about the long-term sustainable impacts that they have. But in terms of the business environment in New Zealand, I think we've been a significant voice. And the fact that we merged into Business New Zealand almost 10 years ago, that's helped the whole process because it's now a key part of what Business New Zealand stands for. And that's the biggest of the business groups in New Zealand. And it's been kind of a success story because of that merger. If I think back over 20 years, there were a few lone voices kind of calling the wilderness, people like Rod Oram, for example. And gradually the momentum of voices in that space has got stronger and stronger, where we reached a real turning point with stuff coming out and saying we are going to say that we endorse the idea that climate change is happening, that it's man-made, and we're going to consistently run a series of articles that trying to elucidate the facts of situations, the strategies that individuals, that businesses, that politicians should be taking to address those issues. The stuff process has been a really important ingredient of bringing it mainstream. If you go back, it's only a little more than a decade ago since Gareth Morgan wrote a book kind of debating whether or not climate change was real. And you know, the fact that we've now got one of the major newspaper chains in the country, or kind of news agencies in the country, running just all the time, continuous stories. And okay, that's mainly on climate change issues, but the fact that that's sustainability is so mainstream, it's a continuous cycle of news going through. That's really great. We're now facing a new set of challenges. I think, reflecting back on the last 20 years, we've moved sustainability from kind of a very niche part of what business is about to being mainstream. So that battle has been won. All the individual parts of it are not won. You know, like climate change is going to be a major issue for the next 50 years and dealing with the effects of it for the next maybe 200, 300 years. But we've moved sustainability into the mainstream. I think now what needs to happen is to kind of move our thinking beyond just trying to avoid doing harm to what are some of the regeneration things we need to do. How do we help business contribute to thriving communities, to helping the planet thrive, helping kind of the whole ecosystem thrive. And I think there's some massive challenges ahead that business kind of needs to wrestle with. It's about setting a new horizon of what are the issues we need to be facing. If I just pick on the issues of inequality, of global trade, of the future of work with AI and robotics and stuff, of the distrust that people now have in business, where go back before the global financial crisis, people generally trusted business to do the right thing. Today, there's not quite so much of that trust. It's been eroded away by bad actions by banks in Australia, by some car companies, notably not Toyota, in terms of emissions cheating. It's been eroded away by the Facebooks and the Googles and so on, selling data without people really realising what they'd signed up for. Business needs to restore trust, and that's going to mean we have to tackle some big systemic issues that we've kind of just left to one side up until now. So I think the next 20, 30 years is new horizons that we're going to have to wrestle with. On behalf of the kind of the work of sustainability in New Zealand, I have to say thank you for your support. We merged into Business New Zealand. Our focus was very much on not wanting to do policy. It was about what practically can we do to help members and help the cause of sustainability. And members have been very loyal supporting that with their money and their contributions. So I say thank you, and here's to the next 20 years.